All right, this is our chapter on interest groups and lobbying. So here we have, we had talked about in prior lectures about political parties. We talked about, political opinion. So it kind of culminates into interest groups and lobbying, which is another aspect of it. So here we have Obamacare, freedom not included. These people, arguing against Obamacare. And then we love Obamacare. And, it's those who are supporting, Obamacare. So these interest groups are going to be on diverse sides and have diverse opinions. So, these groups play fundamental roles in representing individuals, corporate interests, and the public before government. These groups are big enough so that they can actually represent us, what our opinions are at all branches of government, federal, state, and local levels. Um, they have the power to sway, something that us as an individual, yes, we should have the ability to do, but we don't always have that ability. They help inform both the public and lawmakers about issues. They monitor government actions and promote policies that benefit their interests. The key thing is, they're trying to help sway public policy and laws in favor of whatever interest that group supports. So interest groups do not function primarily to elect candidates under a party label. They're not a political party. They are specific groups regarding specific narrow issues that often, cross party lines. So interest groups do not directly control the operations of government. They're just kind of off on the side, and they're trying to incorporate, and they're trying to, they're trying to get things done. Here's an example of how they're on different sides. The first picture is someone who, want to keep their guns, positive NRA member. Pictures B and C are pictures from anti-gun marches that happened after the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Florida. This was largely, organized by teenagers. So they are, they have competing interests. And so that they're both valid interest groups, right, for people who have different, needs. So what is an interest group? It is any formal association of individuals or organizations that attempts to influence government decision making and the making of public policy. An influencer is also called a lobbyist, represents the interest group before the government. Interest groups may take the form of membership organizations that individuals join voluntarily in which they pay their dues. It's kind of like a club in a way. Interest groups may form to represent companies, corporate organizations, or governments. Unions are an example of an interest group, right? The interest is employees, rights and working conditions and things like that. These organizations may employ in-house lobbyists or retain contract lobbyists. For an example here, healthcare, that's an important group concern for AARP. That's the that's American Association of Retired Persons, I think. Something with those retired people. So as they get older, they need more healthcare issues, right? So, their advocacy manager is meeting with the head of the Department of Health and Human Services to try and get that department to shift policy, in favor of the members of the AARP. Now, Javier Becerra, the current Health and Human Services Secretary, used to be the California Attorney General, which is why I'm assuming we have a member of the California Assembly, and we have, California Governor Gavin Newsom right there. Okay. So there's two, we have public and private interest groups. Private interest groups usually seek particularized benefits from government that favor either a single interest or a narrow set of interests. So that could be interest groups are also political action committees or form of interest groups. So it could be, Donald Trump's Save America PAC, right? There's a single interest or a narrow set of interests. It could be any of the anti-death penalty groups, right? They are against the death penalty for their reasons, and it's a narrow interest, not a collective interest. Then we have public interest groups. These attempt to promote public or collective goods. Such collective goods are benefits, tangible or intangible, that help most for all of our citizens. So with a public interest group, that these are things that we actually get benefits from, even if we're not a part of. So here, an example of something that caused, big social change in our country is, the George Floyd incident. So there is, the site where it happened, and then the defund the police movement. So, it's kind of interesting. I actually had talked to a friend of mine who lives in New York, and I said, well, what do you want if you're going to defund the police? And she'd explained to me that they didn't have different programs for kids and things like that, similar programs that are big out here in California, especially in Riverside County. They didn't have there, and that's where they wanted. So, taking that money and making it towards more things for the kids and neighborhood kids, that'd be something that everyone would benefit from in these, cities. So another example of people on different sides of issues, you have, peace for immigrants. We are not criminals, we're hard workers. So pro-immigrants versus secure the border, stop illegal immigration, two different interest groups. So collective action, that is the idea that within an interest group, all members do the necessary work to keep the group funded and operating. Collective action problems exist when people have a disincentive to take action and decide to sit back and count on someone else to do their share of the work within the group. So you might think, well, some of it goes just kind of like the bystander effect that we have in society, saying, oh, well, someone else will take care of it. So those who don't take action in these groups are referred to as free riders. So how do we solve the free rider problem, this collective action problem? We get financial support from patrons outside the group. We offer incentives. We hire lobbyists, these professional lobbyists, so we're not depending on the group members to do it. We offer material incentives, which are tangible benefits of joining a group. We got to think from the NRA, and like the NRA, there's like insurance deduction. You get cheaper car insurance, different things that might, get you to join the group. So then we have incentives that focus on the issues or causes promoted by the group and require membership to be part of an organization. Essentially, we want to make sure that people have some skin in the game. If they have some skin in the game, then they're more likely to not, they're more likely than not to not actually do things and, work with the group. So these groups, they offer or encourage voting, campaigning, contacting lawmakers, and informing the public about causes. So periodically, usually when there's a major election, usually presidential election years, we will get things from different interest groups saying, hey, if you, are interested, have this interest, if you're a state employee, we suggest that you vote for these people because they're going to further, state employees' rights. If you're a county employee, you should vote, this. So informing the public about who you should vote for based on what the candidates have said to these big groups. So, and some people, I think we've established that a lot of people aren't that political savvy. They might just say, oh, I got this card from the union saying do this. Okay, I'll do this. So some interest groups develop as grassroots movements with people from the bottom up among a smaller number of people. If you have a feeling or, an interest or something, right, and you get like-minded people together, you can create an interest group. In our city, there's a couple interest groups that have popped up regarding, saving the community, helping the community be better, things like that, different causes. The interest groups frame issues that benefit their causes. They also try to get issues on the government agenda and monitor government programs. Periodically, one of the groups, they'll send a blast out to everybody saying, hey, come down to city council and comment because they're going to be building something here that we don't want. And so, as many people who can go down will go and speak at city council to try and get the government, to not do that. So we have had recent changes to US interest groups. The most significant recent changes to interest groups are the tremendous increases in both the number and type of groups. So the number of groups that represent the public as opposed to economic interests has grown. Specialization and fragmentation of existing interests have increased, and the last few decades have shown an increase in professionalization and lobbying, as well as sophistication in lobbying techniques. We have a more formal lobbyists now. So again, for lobbyists, these are going to be people that either used to work on Capitol Hill or in Sacramento. They're kind of just like political operatives. They have connections. A lot of them are lawyers that they know how the system works, so they can use that knowledge to try and get the candidate to decide, on that interest group's behalf. So we have business sectors donations to parties and causes in candidates. So what's interesting is, as an individual, I've learned this, you can only donate up to like $5,000 per candidate per election cycle. Other than that, you're violating campaign finance. So that's why these political action committees, these PACs, have to come in, because they can do things. Like a friend of mine, when he ran for judge, instead of making a large donation, the police officers union, they made all of his yard signs, which is a significant cost for the campaign. But that it was essentially a donation, but it wasn't a donation, right? Because it wasn't a formal donation. So we do have different people in different sectors that that donate, and we have these huge PACs that get they give to these PACs and in turn give to the parties. So citizens with lower socioeconomic statuses are often not well represented by interest groups. And that's because, sometimes you think in the neighborhood they live in, do they have these types of groups? So the poor may not have the same opportunities to join groups. If you're working two jobs, do you really want to go attend meetings and, take the time to lobby and do things like that? Can you afford a membership? The poor may not have enough reason to believe they can make a difference or that the government cares about them. A lot of times when I teach political science and people tell me why they don't vote because they don't believe that their vote counts. So we needed to kind of shift that, right? Shift some of these thinking. So how do these interest groups influence election? That's important, right? They support candidates who are sympathetic to their views. They support candidates in order to have access to lawmakers once they're in office, right? If they're a big money donor to me and they want to meet with me, I'm going to meet with them, because next time I run for office, I want their money. Pretty easy, money talks. So some interest groups form these PACs, political action committees. And these are groups that collect funds from donors and distribute them to candidates who support their issues. So a lot of things are done through PACs. A lot of those mailers that you get during the election season are from political action committees. You'll see it's the committee to re-elect so-and-so rather than the candidate themselves. Here's an example of PAC contributions. Just, I guess I should have clarified this. I hope you guys would know a donkey is a Democrat, an elephant is a Republican. Okay. So you'll see that the American Bankers Association, 68% of donated 68.5% of their money to, Republicans, whereas the National Auto Dealers Association donated 72% of theirs to Democrats. Yeah. I just kind of just know about that. The interest groups influencing governments. The lawmakers rely on these interest groups and lobbyists to provide them with information about the technical details of policy proposals, fellow lawmakers' stands, and constituent perceptions. Think about it. If you had someone else do the research for you and present it to you, wouldn't that be nice? So these voting cues that these interest groups give lawmakers are an indication of how to vote on issues and information about ideas they can champion. Interest groups target members of relevant committees. If you represent the Police Officers Association, you're probably not going to want to go to the Environmental Committee and talk about fracking, right? It just doesn't work that way. How do they influence the process? They target lawmakers when there's legislation on the floor. They target the budget process to maximize benefits to their group. Do we want, that's that bread versus butter debate, right? They try to defeat legislation that'll be detrimental to their views. They can do that by also helping, by talking to different lawmakers. And they target the executive and judicial branches of government. So we are going to learn further about those branches, but it is actually harder for interest groups to target the judiciary. They can file briefs and just raise arguments, but that's about it. And then at the executive level, again, they can kind of do what they do at the legislative level. It's just harder to do. So what can they do and what can't they do? So we want to make sure this is all ethical, right? Ethical government's important. So the 1995 Lobbying Disclosure Act defined who can and cannot lobby and requires lobbyists and interest groups to register with the federal government. If you're a professional lobbyist, we need to know who you are. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 further gave restrictions on lobbying. I can't say, hey, I want this bill passed, so I'm going to take you all on a Mediterranean cruise in Italy and pay for all your steak dinners, right? We can't do that. We can't give gifts. We can't say, hey, I represent big pharma. I want, this bill passed. Here's a Maserati. Federal and state governments prohibit certain activities such as providing gifts to lawmakers or compensating lobbyists with commissions. They require disclosure about the amount of money spent on lobbying efforts. A lot of this is information you can find. It's public information because we want to have transparent government where there is accountability. Fun little political cartoon. We don't do enough political cartoons nowadays. So this says, with its Harper's Weekly cartoon of William the Boss Tweed with a money bag for a head, Thomas Nast provided an enduring image of the corrupting power of money on politics. One of the sad things, again, is money talks. You've got to have money to run for office and to do it and to make change. One of the problems we have in our country right now. So interest groups, something that's important to know, interest groups, they fall under the First Amendment because we have a right to assemble. They also have freedom of speech to promote their views. Again, as we learned, just because we have freedom of speech does not mean it is, unilateral. I mean, unfettered. We have, we have speech that, is limited in certain circumstances. It has been argued that campaign expenditures are a form of free speech because essentially you're letting your money talk. And the Supreme Court has supported this argument because if I give $1 million to, the candidate who's going to be tough on crime, I'm saying I support tough on crime, right? You're saying your support by spending that money. All right, that is it on interest groups.